Hey everybody, this is DM Mike, and this is campaign diary number 4 for Rise of Tiamat. Now, we left off in the village with on top of the ice glacier as the characters just finished off destroying an orc patrol, which really left the villagers and the players in a pretty precarious situation. Now, as you can see here through Tabletop Simulator, the place is a mess. The tower's fallen down, the trolls, the bodies are everywhere. There's a lot to deal with for the players and the villagers at this time. The threat remains that the orc tribe most likely will send another patrol, or worst case scenario, the dragon's going to come after this patrol doesn't return back to the lair. So there's a no-win situation here. We spent the first hour, I think, trying to figure out, at least the players did, along with the shaman and the villagers, trying to figure out just what to do. How do we salvage the situation? Because no matter what happens, someone's going to pay the price, and most likely it's going to be the villagers. So after about 45 minutes to an hour of people kind of doing various things around the camp and trying to figure out how do we, first of all, rest because we're almost dead. We're like single-digit HP right now and no spells, and we still have to get to a lair. And how do we rescue these villagers? So they talked and tried to work this out, and what they eventually settled upon was taking the villagers obviously from the village and bringing them back to the ship. I'll put a picture up here real fast. Back to the ship, and making a deal with a captain. They could bring them on as refugees, which allowed them to get away from the village, away from most likely being slaughtered, but also allowed the players time to rest on the boat, because there was no way they were getting 4 hours, because a patrol most likely would show up with even more orcs and trolls, and also 8 hours was completely out of the question. So this is what they did. Now, this took several hours to do. It took about 2 hours max to get the villagers on their feet, take what they can, and march from the village down to the end of the glacier, hop down the, go down the rope without falling, going down the rope to the ocean, and then water walking that was cast by the druid, and getting them to the boat. And, and they kind of bribed the captain a little bit with a lot of extra money, and he was totally fine with this. And then, of course, they stayed on the boat and got their rest. So everybody kind of got back to where they needed to go, back to full potential to go after the lair. So now the characters are rested and they got to find the lair. Now in my game, I've made the lair kind of difficult to find. You can't just go wandering out and find the lair. It's enchanted. It prevents itself from being found. So back in the village, the shaman said, hey, I will show you the way. But now she's been weakened, she was injured, and she's lost a lot of her connection now, and attunement to the village and magic and whatnot. So it's been very, very difficult for her. So they had to find another way. Well, the only way they could do that was use the witch's fire, which connects all the witches and the hags and the shamans all together. And they had to call upon a hag to help them find the lair. Because what better way to find an evil lair than with an evil hag, all right? So they got back to the glacier. The shaman made the connection with one of the hags there, and the hag demanded sacrifice. And I went around the table. We kind of turned off all the lights, put some LED torches up all around the room. And, of course, the hag shows up and demands a tithe from each character. It wasn't an easy thing they had to do. Matter of fact, I think 3 people in general had the toughest time with this, on purpose, really. First of all, it was Pax. Pax immediately, her sacrifice was her eye. She decided to give one up. That kind of shocked me as a DM. I was like, whoa, you just went right for it, didn't you? The next big thing, I think, was the druid who sacrificed one of her earrings that actually had a teardrop of a unicorn in it. And that, that kind of really piqued the interest of the hag. But the one thing I think, and Thembraeus, our thief, and Storm also gave up some artifacts to the hag. But really the difficult one was a paladin. Because hags stand in stark contrast to a paladin. And so he did kind of offer something, and she didn't want it. I can't remember now what it was. She wanted the jewel that was embedded in the hilt of his sword that was given to him by his father. Now, this jewel had a slight enchantment to it. The only thing it really did was anywhere in the world this paladin was, Lucius was, the jewel would always lead him back to El Torel. So it always leads him home, right? And the hag knew that his father had been captured, and the hag knew how important that jewel was. And to her, that was the perfect sacrifice. And I know the player, I think, was struggling with that, the hag's demand, but it was on purpose. The hag wanted to give him the most brutal sacrifice, even though she wasn't expecting to get an eye from Pax, to be honest. But she really wanted to come down hard on the paladin. She's evil. What can I say? She wanted to do that. So with a great struggle and great effort, the paladin sacrificed the jewel. The hag eventually took out her eye and placed it in a huge black lantern that's probably like, that big. It weighed about 65 pounds and weighed down by these black ivory chains, ebony chains. And only the paladin could use it. Another insult to injury, right? So this thing is huge and it's heavy and it's got the eye floating in there. And the eye eventually leads them to the lair. When they get there, poof, it's gone. And this is where as a DM, you need to really set up these lairs, how they feel to the player and to the character. Even as they approach the lair, one of the little fairy familiars was having a hard time. He didn't want to go any further. His eyes were glowing. The lair has a weird resonance and reaction to magic. So people were experiencing wild magic going on. Their spells were suddenly very, very powerful or weak. It was kind of all over the place. It was just an uneasy feeling as they approached and went down into the lair. Now I'll put a little shot up here. You can see the map that I'm using, an isometric map. This is what I use to kind of shake things up. As I've said in one of my prep videos, I find the maps for Rise of Tiamat right now to be pretty bland, empty, and kind of boring. Didn't want to do that. I decided to piece this together and create my own map using bits and pieces of the original map. So anyway, they went through it and they kind of explored that opening section and went right first and saw the ice trolls and said, no, thank you, and went left. And there they encountered one orc on patrol who was going to the larder. They took him out really quick. I think everybody rolled 220 or something. Like something brutal happened is what I remember. And this orc was just like gutted within 2 hits, just completely wiped out. I mean, too bad they couldn't do that later, but that's exactly what happened. They just wiped. They made a pile of gore with that orc. But they raided the larder, got a few items out of there. Again, taken directly from the book, so I didn't really remove too many things. I kept everything intact, even though I had changed the map. But they continued their exploration and went up the hallway, and this is where one of the biggest encounters have happened, and this is where we left off. They ended up alerting the orcs in the kind of kitchen dining hall area. And this was a pretty brutal encounter. Matter of fact, this is where we left off. We're kind of in the middle of it, and people are already suffering quite a bit. And it's one of those encounters as a DM, you walk away and go, wow, did I make that too hard? did I not maybe pull some punches there? But I think upon further reflection, there's only one thing I probably could have done that may have eased up on the throttle a little bit. But I think it makes sense. It makes sense in how things are going down. The dragon is not going to have a bunch of laymen laying around in the lair who are weak, who cannot fight, who don't have strategy to guard his lair. And I think also what my players were experiencing was a little bit of my shakeup, the shakeup of my tactics. My enemies now have action. Of course, they have their actions, but they have bonus actions, they have lair actions, and they have reactions. So there's a lot more going on, a lot more mechanics happening in this battle. I'm not going to go into specifics about what happened in the battle, but it's pretty brutal. Everybody is feeling the sting of those great battle axes that these orcs are wielding. It's going to require more tactics and more energy, I think, by my players to really get through this next encounter. Now, one thing that did happen in there was Thembraeus finally attuned himself to the dragon mask. And I know there are rules and things you're supposed to do and how you attune yourself to an item in the player's handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide. I just kind of nixed all that. He had to hit a DC number of 28 on a saving throw. And back in the village, he tried to do this and almost killed himself. But here, suddenly, in the middle of the battle, when I think he was just throwing caution to the wind, high risk, he puts it on and attunes himself right there in the middle of battle. He rolled a 29 when he added all his bonuses. A 29, so he just barely got over my threshold. So anyway, guys, this is where we've left off. Everybody's in a pretty precarious situation. We still have to search for Maketh and get the heck out of that lair and get back to the boat, hopefully in one piece, without waking or disturbing the dragon. But there is one caveat to this. When Thembraeus put the mask on the white dragon, he could see a vision of the white dragon in its lair as the dragon's head turned towards him. So, to be honest with you, the dragon is very aware of a new presence in the lair. So we're going to see how this goes. All right, guys, that's it. That's all I got for you. See you in the next one.